Business owners of Reddit, what's the most obnoxious reason an employee quit had to be fired over? Pawnshop employee stole $400 from the cash register, then realized that there were video cameras. He had no idea where the security footage was stored, so in order to cover his tracks he set the store on fire. He actually ended up getting pretty badly burned in the process and went to jail right after the hospital. Funny thing is, if he'd just put the money back, no one would have even looked at the tapes. I worked for a boutique hotel, small, cute, expensive AF, as an ops manager. Basically, unless the area manager had to come in, I was the law. I get a frantic call on my downtime from an employee claiming our overnight guy tried to assault him. I have a sigh, as the guy freaking out is notorious for being a drama queen. I load up the security camera on my home PC, go to the time frame, and holy crap, our night guy legitimately lunged at his co-worker and tried to strangle him. Luckily a desk was between them, and that gave the victim time to bolt. Instantly felt like a dong for doubting him. Well, this is when I call in the area manager. We show up at the ass crack of dawn and speak with the dude who made the attack, and he claims he didn't do it. We show him the video, and I crap you not, he responds with, I don't recall the events of that evening. We fired him on the spot. What started the fight, you ask? Well, the victim had done extra work to make the attacker's shift easier. The attacker felt like this was an insult to his work ethic. Oh, and I got multiple reference requests from similar hotels asking for a good reference. I simply said I wasn't able to provide a positive reference, as legally that was all I could say. Employee, does a nice thing. Overnight guy, you deserve to die now. My dad and I ran a business together cleaning out foreclosed homes for a real estate agency as I was finishing high school. I was a senior, so I got out at lunchtime and we could usually get a house done in a half day. Sometimes we'd get some bad ones and we had a few guys that we would call to see if they wanted to make a quick $100 for a day's work. On my literal last day of class, my dad picked up one of our usual guys and got one house about 90% done by lunch. He was a pretty normal guy that we had never had any trouble with. The guy we paid to help my dad went out to the truck and came back into that house with a gun and robbed my dad of his wallet and took his keys and left in our truck. Funny thing is, my dad only had the cash he was about to give him an hour later for finishing up the house. The state police got the guy's number from us and they told him some bogus story about how my dad was being investigated for not paying his workers, and if met them with the truck they would get his statement and let him go. Idiot pulls up and gets arrested on the spot. He got 8 years in prison. I had a subcontractor on a job for my company try and convince the client that they should dump me and go with their business and they would undercut me by 10%. Learned this from the client, who asked me to find another person to service our contract. Employee had corporate card, charge of vacation, purse, fossil watch, takeout, along with overall being miserable to work with. Had laptop stolen within weeks of joining. Fired her, and a few days later a watch catalog from Fossil showed up at the office with her name on it. Have active court cases for all the theft. I work for a decent sized company, 7K, and the large majority of employees do not have a corporate card. I do for travel, and was told the company loses around $6 million a year for personal charges from them. Freaking mind blowing. People think they can get away with it. Like, we have a freaking department to track this. Not like you can throw away the receipt and poof, no proof. We had a young IT intern helping with some hardware inventory tasks. It wasn't uncommon for laptops not to make it back to us as projects would hoard them from terminated employees, but one day we noticed his backpack open and a laptop of a model we used sticking out. Sent him to the other side of the building and checked the serial number, and yep, it was one he reported as missing during a recent inventory. Opportunistic theft is one thing, but bringing it back into the office every day, just row. I'm not a business owner, but I'm a student manager, aka I don't really have the ability to fire someone, but I had to in this case. This one kid was trouble to say the least, and I asked him to go check the bathrooms to make sure they were clean stocked. When he asked about the woman's room, I said just to knock and make sure nobody was inside. Apparently he banged on the door and screamed, in his very deep voice, "WHO in here? Everybody get out." He then entered the bathroom where a poor little elderly woman was inside the stall, and continued to bang on the stall yelling, "Get out." He was yelling so loud I actually heard him and went to investigate. The poor woman was whimpering and calling the police, and he just was the kind of person who had no idea how he came across. There was many weird issues, but this obviously topped the cake, and I told him he was done and needed to go home. The poor old woman was so upset that she refused to leave the bathroom and I had to call her son for her. Don't own a business but work on employee claims and lawsuits. I've told this story on here before. A guy filed a discrimination complaint against the company after he got fired for stealing hot dogs from the refrigerator. This warehouse, big company, this was not at my location, kept a stock of hot dogs for employee appreciation picnics, usually weekly cookouts. No one knew why they were disappearing, so announcements were made and all employees were asked to not eat the hot dogs, and if they wanted some they could ask but couldn't have several packs. That didn't work, so warnings were announced. Finally a camera was installed near the refrigerator and he got caught red-handed. He was just practically inhaling the hot dogs directly from refrigerator by the packs. After he was fired, he filed a discrimination claim on the basis of disability due to his weight. I sent the response with a video of him eating the hot dogs. Also, he couldn't prove his weight was a disability under the ADA and weight is not a protected class. We won that claim. The picture of an obese man on his knees as if in prayer in front of a fridge just eating raw hot dogs by the pack is something I never thought I would be forced to face. My dad owned his own business working as a color corrector editor. He had this one employee who had been there since day one and ended up becoming similar to an assistant manager. My dad owned that company for 10 plus years and, just recently, he had to fire the assistant manager because apparently he was telling employees and customers that my dad hates gays, people who aren't white, his kids, his whole family, that he's a terrible person, etc. Basically driving all business away, pushing my dad's company towards bankruptcy. Turns out he was a narcissistic sociopath. My dad's just sad his employees never trusted him enough to tell him about what this guy would say to them. Had a guy on a location fake an injury. Now mind you, he did injure himself severely accidentally, but that wasn't his plan. His plan had been to fake a minor injury and get put on workers' comp. The problem was he screwed up how to do it and ended up hurting himself severely. You ask, how did you know he was trying to fake injure himself? Well, that's very easy to explain. We had a 20-minute tape of him hiding behind one of the trucks on the worksite practicing his fall. Then a written confession from friends saying that he'd been planning it since the day we hired him. Tool and die shop owner here. One of our machinists would go out for lunch and slam back 3-4 beers every day. When I found out, I told him he can't drink beer at lunch. He said it was his time and what he did at lunch was his business, not mine. The next day he came back from lunch smelling like beer. I let him go on the spot. A few years later he showed up in my office asking for his old job back. He said that he was an alcoholic back then and was sorry for his behavior. He was now sober and needed a job. I hired him on the spot and it worked out great for 5 or 6 years. Then he started drinking again and I had to let him go a second time. I have no idea how he is doing now, but I often wonder. He was a great machinist and a nice guy when he was sober. He was a great machinist. Must have been to liquid lunch on the regular and have still 10 fingers. Back when I had my translation business, I hired a guy to seek out contracts for me. I'd pay him 20% finder's fee. Instead of sending the finished project to a client, he accidentally sent naked pictures of himself. I learned of it when my client forwarded me the mail half an hour later, including the multiple glorious cockshots. I'd love to hear an explanation for this. I fired a guy because he said he couldn't come to work because it was raining and he had just washed his car the day before. Woman was using company FedEx to deliver purses for her Etsy shop. When you guys found out, you should have ordered a purse to the address of the HR department, then just watch her panic in confusion. Medical clinic. An employee told a patient he wants to know what she tastes like. Doesn't get much worse. Not many exit interviews start with, "We really hope that was just sexual harassment, but we're gonna inventory the samples just in case." The one that instantly jumps to mind was the woman who was fired day 2 of a call center training course because she wouldn't stop touching herself. Not sure how she got through HR screening. This was for a wireless phone company too, not a chat line or anything. My wife's cousin worked with me and her father at our work. landscaping, for a couple months. He had previous experience and we needed the help, so we hired him, despite warnings to the owner from my father-in-law that he was an butthole. To name a couple of things, we were putting fresh mulch in one of the industrial parks that we maintained, and he had me close the doors to the bed of the truck, after which he raised the bed so all the mulch would slide to the back, except the doors weren't designed for that type of load, and immediately sprang open. If they hadn't hit the ground while swinging open, they would have royally fricked up the cars on either side of us. He then proceeded to call the owner of the company and tell him what happened, placing all the blame on me for not closing the doors right. He took him on a paver job, and he insisted that he could cut pavers with our wet saw, except he didn't use gloves, so the material from the pavers being cut, which includes some nasty stuff, absolutely destroyed the skin on his hands, and he called out for the next 2 days because he couldn't move his fingers. This was not the first time that he had made this mistake. Same paver job, which called for Belgium block to be installed along the driveway. He decided it would be a good idea to mix the mortar and the sand for the base on the owner's freshly paved driveway and use it as he needed it, except it rained the day he did so, and he ended up with a 3-stroke 4-ton block of what was essentially concrete in the middle of their again freshly paved driveway. On multiple occasions we got reports from the grass cutting crew that he went out with that he did nothing all day except sit in the truck, text his wife, and smoke cigarettes. He thought he could get away with this because neither myself nor my father-in-law were with him. Eventually he was fired, and we got a couple extremely nasty but entertaining phone calls from his wife calling all of us some choice names while vowing that we were no longer part of his family. I used to own a bakery and a woman quit because she blamed her yeast infection on a bad batch of yeast I bought from China. I may be a guy, but I don't think that's how it works. Depends on what she's using for a bread box. Not an owner, but in a supervisory role. We had a driver that refused to drive at night, claiming it wasn't safe. She was third shift. Her role was driver. This was all that was expected of her. Do the 3 to 7 trips a month that happen between 9 PM and 5 AM. This was after her pleading to be put on third shift. Our director at the time was shady and competent, not sure which, so this went on for 6 months longer than it should have. Best story was from back in the day when I worked at a veterinary clinic. A girl got fired for basically hating cats and dogs. She said as a receptionist she thought she would only have to talk to people. She didn't even like people. Thank goodness that manager switched into a different role. That wasn't even her worst hire. We hired a new girl for the local pharmacy I managed. Very sweet and hardworking and had prior experience at another major pharmacy chain. We had our own build of a common pharmacy software, and it took a day to train on how the system worked, and a day to train on how our company's process worked. She paid great attention to the first day and knew her ins and out of the software, but then checked out on the second day because she already knew how pharmacy process worked since she's worked in one before. But ours didn't follow the same protocol or procedure. We had no storefront. We were purely delivery only. These deliveries needed to be scheduled in a specific order and as efficiently as possible, as compared to retail chains where they will fill drug 1 on Monday, drug 2 on Wednesday, and drug 3 on Thursday, so you have to come in 3 different times. We could not drill this into her head no matter how many times we tried. She was retrained by me twice, and by 2 other colleagues because we thought maybe a different training mindset would be beneficial. The day I had to fire her, she had an appointment that night to take her sick cat to the vet to get put down. I felt like the biggest butthole in the world and wanted to cry with her, but I also felt like I gave her so many chances and she kept coming back to we always did it this way at the other place. Not my business but my dad's. He hired predominantly people with criminal records and literally all they had to do was inspect rental cars for damage as the cars left the lot and keep their noses clean. You could do pretty much anything you wanted on your downtime with no complaints from my dad as long as he didn't get any complaints from the owners of the car lot. One day one of the supervisors for the car lot I worked for walks out and asks me for my dad's number. Supervisor had caught a guy stealing gas from the property. He even had security camera footage of it happening. Dude was instantly fired. Good on your dad for hiring people who struggle getting jobs. You have been visited by Post Doggo. Don't worry, you do not need to comment to have good luck. Post Dogo only came to give you good vibes and to wish that your crush or whoever you want texts you. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.